Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Defiant, watching the stars move slowly past the bridge windows. His ship was not the biggest or fastest in the human fleet, but it was his home. The Defiant was a destroyer-class vessel, built for speed and fighting rather than comfort. Her crew of 230 people had been together for 3 years now, and they worked like a well-oiled machine. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter stood next to him, reading reports from the outer colonies. Her face was serious as she looked through the data on her tablet. As his first officer, she always kept him informed about everything happening in their sector of space. Today, something was different. The reports were strange and frightening. "Captain, we're getting some odd signals from the Kepler colonies," Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. "The transmissions cut off suddenly about 6 hours ago. All of them." Jake frowned and turned to face her. The Kepler colonies were home to millions of people spread across 12 different worlds. They were peaceful farming and mining communities that had never caused trouble for anyone. For all their signals to stop at once meant something very bad had happened. "What kind of signals were they sending before they went dark?" Jake asked. Lisa's hands shook slightly as she scrolled through the data. "Emergency broadcasts, sir. They were screaming about ships in the sky, massive ships that they had never seen before. The last message we received was from New Terra Colony. The radio operator was saying something about the sky turning black with enemy vessels." Before Jake could respond, Communications Officer Steve Turner called out from his station. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. It's weak, but it's coming from the direction of the Kepler system." "Put it through the speakers," Jake ordered. The bridge filled with static, and then a terrified voice broke through. The signal was broken and full of interference, but they could make out the words clearly enough to understand the horror. "This is Colonial Defense Station 7. We are under attack by unknown forces. Their ships are enormous. Our weapons are not working against them. They're destroying everything. Entire planets are just gone. Please, if anyone can hear this, stay away from the Kepler system. These things are not like anything we've ever seen. They're wiping out whole worlds like they're nothing. The Vorthak Empire has come and we cannot stop them." The transmission ended with a burst of static that made everyone on the bridge wince. Jake felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. He had heard stories about the Vorthak Empire, but they were like ghost stories told by spacers in dark corners of station bars. Ancient tales of crystalline beings who could destroy planets with their minds and traveled in ships the size of moons. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez's voice came over the comm system from the engine room. "Captain, I monitored that transmission. If what they're saying is true, we need to get word back to Earth Fleet Command immediately." Jake nodded, though Danny could not see him. "Steve, send a priority message to Command. Tell them we have confirmed reports of Vorthak Empire activity in the Kepler system. Request immediate reinforcement and evacuation orders for all colonies in the area." As Steve worked at his communications console, Tactical Officer Karen Walsh looked up from her weapons display. Her face was pale, and her hands gripped the edge of her console tightly. "Sir, I've been running calculations based on the old reports about Vorthak ships. If even half of what we've heard is true, our entire fleet wouldn't be able to stop them." Jake stood up from his chair and walked to the main viewing screen. The stars looked peaceful and calm, but somewhere out there in the darkness, an ancient evil was destroying human worlds. He thought about the millions of people who lived in the Kepler colonies. Farmers and miners, teachers and doctors, children and families who had never hurt anyone. "What do we know about the Vorthak Empire?" Jake asked his crew. Lisa consulted her database and began reading. "According to the old records, they're a race of crystalline beings who have been conquering worlds for over 3,000 years. Their technology is far beyond anything we understand. They can manipulate space and time itself as weapons. Their ships are said to be living things, grown rather than built." Navigator Pete Collins looked up from his charts. "The historical records say they move from galaxy to galaxy, destroying everything in their path. They don't take prisoners or negotiate. They just wipe out entire civilizations and move on to the next one." Medical Officer Dr. Amy Brooks joined the conversation from her station near the back of the bridge. The few survivors who have ever encountered them described their weapons as reality-warping devices. They can make matter simply cease to exist, Whole planets just disappear as if they were never there. Jake listened to his crew and felt the weight of command pressing down on him. The Defiant was just one small ship with basic weapons and shields. Against an enemy that could destroy planets, they would be like a mosquito attacking a giant. But those were human worlds out there, and human people who needed help. "Steve, any response from command yet?" Jake asked. Steve shook his head. "Nothing yet, sir. But given the distance, it will be at least 4 hours before they receive our message and another 4 before we get a reply." 8 hours, Jake said quietly. In 8 hours, how many more worlds could the Vorthak destroy? The bridge fell silent as everyone considered the implications. If the enemy was moving through the Kepler system at the same rate they had destroyed the first colonies, they could wipe out the entire region before Earth Fleet Command even knew what was happening. Lisa stepped closer to Jake and lowered her voice. "Sir, what are you thinking?" Jake looked at the star charts displayed on the main screen. The Kepler system was only 6 hours away at maximum speed. By the time reinforcements arrived from Earth, it would be too late for anyone still alive out there. "I'm thinking about the 200 million people living in New Boston," Jake said. "It's the largest colony in the Kepler system. If the Vorthak are moving systematically through the region, New Boston will be their primary target." Karen Walsh spoke up from her tactical station. "Captain, with all due respect, what could we possibly do against an enemy that can destroy planets? Our weapons are nuclear missiles and plasma cannons. According to these reports, the Vorthak ships can absorb that kind of firepower without even noticing it." Jake turned to face his crew. These were good people who trusted him to make the right decisions. They had families back on Earth and their own lives to think about. He had no right to ask them to fly into certain death, but he also could not stand by and let millions of innocent people die without trying to help. "I know the odds," Jake said. "I know we're just one ship against an empire that has conquered galaxies. But those are our people out there, human beings who are counting on us to protect them. Maybe we can't win, but maybe we can buy them time to escape. Maybe we can slow the enemy down long enough for the real fleet to arrive." Danny's voice came over the comm again. "Captain, I've been monitoring the long-range sensors. There are massive energy signatures moving through the Kepler system. Whatever is out there, it's big and it's heading straight for the populated worlds." Jake made his decision. "Pete, set course for the Kepler system, maximum speed. Danny, I want everything the engines can give us. Karen, start running diagnostics on all weapon systems. Lisa, prepare the crew for battle stations." As his crew began carrying out his orders, Jake sat back down in his command chair. He knew he might be leading his people to their deaths, but he also knew he could not live with himself if he did not try. The Vorthak Empire had destroyed worlds across the galaxy for thousands of years, and no one had ever stood up to them. Today, that was going to change. Today, one human ship was going to stand its ground. The USS Defiant raced through space at full speed, her engines pushing harder than they had ever been pushed before. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez watched his instruments with growing concern. The fusion reactors were running at 110% capacity, well beyond their safe operating limits. But these were not safe times, and Danny knew that every minute counted. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the star field ahead of them. They had been traveling for 4 hours now, and the Kepler system was getting closer. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. Everyone knew what they were flying toward, and everyone knew their chances of coming back alive were almost zero. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter walked up to Jake with a datapad in her hands. Her face was grim as she showed him the latest sensor readings. "Captain, we're starting to pick up debris fields where the outer colonies used to be. The sensors are detecting metal fragments and traces of organic matter scattered across millions of kilometers of space." Jake looked at the readings and felt sick to his stomach. Each debris field represented a world where millions of people had lived and worked and raised their families. Now those worlds were nothing but scattered dust floating in the emptiness of space. "How many colonies are confirmed destroyed?" Jake asked. 7 so far, Lisa replied. "That's nearly 60 million people gone in less than 12 hours. Communications Officer Steve Turner suddenly sat up straight at his station. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the Colonial Defense Fleet. Admiral Parker is requesting immediate communication with all ships in the area." "Put him through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral William Parker, commander of the Colonial Defense Forces. The admiral looked exhausted and frightened. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship was filled with smoke and sparks flew from damaged equipment. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker aboard the CNS Liberty. I am ordering an immediate withdrawal of all military and civilian vessels from the Kepler system. The enemy force is beyond anything we can handle. We have lost 12 ships in the last hour alone, and our weapons are completely ineffective against their technology." Jake stepped forward. "Admiral, this is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiant. What's the status of New Boston and the other remaining colonies?" Admiral Parker's face became even more grim. "Captain Morrison, New Boston still has 200 million civilians. The evacuation ships can't move that many people fast enough. The enemy fleet is heading straight for them, and they'll arrive in less than 3 hours. We estimate they'll reach the planet in 2 hours and 40 minutes. What about reinforcements from Earth Fleet?" Jake asked. The admiral shook his head. "The nearest battle group is 18 hours away. Even if they left immediately, they wouldn't arrive until long after New Boston is destroyed. I'm sorry, Captain, but we have to face reality. We cannot save those people." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "So we just abandon them? We just let 200 million innocent people die without even trying to help?" "Captain, you don't understand what we're facing out here," Admiral Parker said. "These Vorthak ships are massive. Each one is the size of a small moon. They have weapons that can make entire planets disappear. Our biggest warships are like toys compared to them. I've seen plasma cannons that could destroy a city bounce off their shields without leaving a scratch." Lisa stepped up beside Jake. "Admiral, how many ships do they have?" 12 capital ships, Admiral Parker replied, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a solar system. They move in perfect formation and their tactics are flawless. Captain Morrison, I strongly advise you to turn around and head back to Earth. There's nothing any of us can do here." Jake looked around at his bridge crew. Navigator Pete Collins was studying the tactical display, his fingers moving quickly across his controls as he calculated approach vectors. Tactical Officer Karen Walsh was running weapon diagnostics, even though everyone knew their weapons would be useless. Medical Officer Dr. Amy Brooks was preparing the medical bay for casualties. That would probably include everyone on the ship. "Admiral, with respect, I disagree," Jake said. "Those are human beings on New Boston. They're counting on us to protect them. I didn't join the fleet to run away when things got difficult." Admiral Parker's expression became angry. "Captain, this isn't about courage or honor. This is about facing mathematical reality. Your ship has a crew of 230 people. Are you willing to sacrifice all their lives on a gesture that won't save anyone?" Before Jake could answer, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez's voice came over the comm system. "Captain, could you come down to engineering? There's something I need to show you." Jake looked at the Admiral on the screen. "Admiral, I'll be in touch." He cut the transmission and headed for the elevator. Lisa followed him, along with Karen and Pete. They rode down to the engineering deck in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the impossible situation they faced. Danny was waiting for them in the main engineering bay, standing next to a large piece of equipment that Jake didn't recognize. It looked like a combination of shield generators and sensor arrays all connected together with thick power cables. "What is this, Danny?" Jake asked. Danny smiled for the first time in hours. "Captain, my team and I have been working on this for the past 6 months. It's a shield modification based on some old theories about quantum resonance and harmonic frequencies." Karen looked at the device with interest. "What does it do?" "Well, that's the thing," Danny said. "We don't know for sure if it will work. The theory is that instead of trying to block enemy weapons with our shields, we can use the ship's hull as a resonance chamber. The energy from incoming attacks gets absorbed and then redistributed through the entire structure of the ship." Lisa frowned. "That sounds incredibly dangerous. What happens if the resonance frequency is wrong?" Danny shrugged. Then the ship tears itself apart and we all die. But if it works, we might be able to survive weapons that would normally destroy us. Instantly, Pete looked at the calculations on Danny's computer screen. How did you come up with this idea? Remember that old Earth legend about a kid named David who fought a giant named Goliath? Danny asked. David didn't try to be bigger or stronger than the giant. He used a different approach entirely. He used the giant's size against him. Jake stared at the device. It looked like something put together from spare parts and desperate hope, but it was the only chance they had to make any difference in the coming battle. How long would it take to install this system? Jake asked. It's already installed, Danny said. We've been working on it during off-duty hours for months. All I need to do is connect it to the main power grid and run a few tests. And if it doesn't work? Danny's expression became serious. Then we die a little faster than we would have anyway. Jake looked around at his senior officers. These people had followed him for 3 years, through dangerous missions and difficult times. Now he was asking them to trust him with their lives on a plan that might not even work. What do you all think? Jake asked. Karen spoke first. Sir, the Admiral is right about one thing. Our conventional weapons won't scratch those Vorthak ships, but if Danny's device gives us even a small chance of surviving long enough to help, the people on New Boston, I think we should try it. Pete nodded. The navigation charts show that if we position ourselves between the Vorthak fleet and New Boston, we could force them to go through us to reach the planet. Even if we only delay them for a few minutes, that's a few more minutes for the evacuation ships to get people to safety. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at Jake. Captain, I've served with you long enough to know that you're not going to abandon those people no matter what anyone says. If we're going to do this, we should do it right. Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew. They knew the odds as well as he did, but they were willing to stand with him anyway. That was what made humans special, he thought. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't calculate the probability of success. They just did what was right. Danny, how long do you need to get the system online? Jake asked. Give me 30 minutes, Danny replied. You've got it, Jake said. Pete, plot a course that will put us between the Vorthak fleet and New Boston. Karen, I want every weapon we have ready for battle. Lisa, prepare the crew for combat. On Mao, his officers hurried to carry out their orders. Jake looked out through the viewport at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there, an enemy that had conquered galaxies was heading toward a world full of innocent people. The USS Defiant was just one small ship with an untested weapon system and a crew that refused to give up. It was time to find out if David really could beat Goliath. The USS Defiant hung in space like a tiny metal dot against the vast darkness. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the sensor displays as 12 massive shapes approached from the outer system. The Vorthak fleet moved with deadly grace, their ships so large that each one cast shadows across entire moons. Distance to enemy fleet? Jake asked. Navigator Pete Collins checked his instruments. 2 million kilometers and closing, sir. At their current speed, they'll be in weapons. Range in 12 minutes. Jake nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, we're going to face an enemy that has destroyed countless worlds. They think we're just another small obstacle to brush aside. They're about to learn that humans don't brush aside easily. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every person on New Boston who can't fight for themselves. We're fighting to show the galaxy that some things are worth dying for. Battle stations. Throughout the ship, red lights began flashing and alarm bells rang. Crew members ran to their positions, sealing blast doors and powering up systems. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez made final adjustments to his experimental shield system. His hands shook slightly as he worked, but his voice was steady when he spoke into his comm unit. Captain, the resonance system is online and ready. I've run every test I can think of, but we won't know if it really works until we get shot at. Understood, Danny. Just keep those engines running no matter what happens. On the bridge, Tactical Officer Karen Walsh stared at her weapons display. The Defiant carried 40 nuclear missiles, 6 plasma cannons, and 2 railguns that fired metal slugs at incredible speeds. Against a normal enemy, It would be a respectable amount of firepower. Against ships the size of small moons, it seemed pathetic. "Captain, I have target locks on the lead enemy vessel," Karen reported. "But sir, I have to tell you, our biggest missiles wouldn't even scratch the paint on those things." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter stood beside Jake, watching the tactical display. The Vorthak ships were arranged in a perfect diamond formation, moving through space with mechanical precision. Each ship was over 50 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that could crack planets. "They're not even trying to avoid us," Lisa observed. "They're coming straight at us like we don't exist." Communications Officer Steve Turner looked up from his station. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the lead Vorthak ship. They're trying to communicate with us." "Put it through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed something that made several crew members gasp. The being that appeared was not quite solid, seeming to be made of living crystal that shifted colors as it moved. Its voice sounded like wind blowing through broken glass. "I am War Master Kethvar of the Vorthak Empire. You pilot a primitive vessel into our path. Move, aside or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds to comply." Jake stepped forward to face the screen. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship USS Defiant. We will not move aside. If you want to reach the colonies behind us, you'll have to go through us." The crystalline being seemed amused by Jake's words. "Your species is unknown to us, but your foolishness is familiar. Many races have chosen death over surrender. We will grant your wish." The transmission ended, and immediately the sensors began screaming warnings. Karen's voice was tight with fear as she called out readings. From her tactical station, "Captain, the lead ship is charging some kind of massive weapon. Energy readings are off the scale. Whatever they're about to hit us with, it's designed to destroy planets." "All hands, brace for impact," Jake announced. "Danny, engage the resonance system now." Through the ship, a low humming sound began to build. The hull itself started to vibrate slightly as Danny's modifications came online. Every piece of metal in the Defiant became part of a giant tuning fork, ready to absorb and redirect energy in ways that the Vorthak had never encountered. The enemy weapon fired, a beam of pure energy, bright enough to blind anyone who looked. Directly at it, lanced across space and struck the Defiant. The entire ship rang like a massive bell as the quantum cascade weapon hit their shields. The lights flickered and sparks flew from several control panels, but when the energy beam faded, the USS Defiant was still there. On the bridge, Jake felt his heart pounding as he realized they had survived. The ship was damaged, and several systems were offline, but they were alive. Around him, his crew stared in amazement at their instruments. "Damage report," Jake called out. "Shield generators are down to 60%, Karen reported. "We've lost 2 plasma cannons and the navigation computer is acting strange. But sir, we're still here." In the engine room, Danny was laughing with relief and excitement. "Captain, it worked. The resonance system absorbed most of the energy and spread it through the hull. We're like a bell that got struck with a hammer, but bells don't break when you hit them, they just ring." Lisa looked at the tactical display in amazement. "The Vorthak ship that fired at us is showing power fluctuations. I think the energy feedback traveled back through their weapon beam." Jake realized what had happened. The Vorthak weapon was designed to destroy targets by overwhelming them with raw energy, but Danny's system had turned their ship into something that could absorb that energy and send it back where it came from. Instead of being destroyed, they had actually damaged their attacker. "Karen, return fire with everything we have," Jake ordered. The Defiant's weapons came to life. Nuclear missiles streaked through space toward the massive Vorthak vessel, followed by plasma cannon blasts and metal slugs from the railguns. The enemy ship's shields flared as the primitive human weapons struck home. War Master Kethvar watched, his tactical displays with growing confusion. His most powerful weapon had failed to destroy a tiny primitive vessel, and now that same vessel was actually damaging his flagship with crude chemical explosives and metal projectiles. This was impossible according to everything the Vorthak knew about warfare. "Fire all weapons at the human ship," he ordered his crew. "Destroy it completely." The Vorthak fleet opened fire with dozens of quantum cascade beams, reality-warping missiles, and energy weapons that could melt asteroids. The space around the Defiant filled with deadly light as enough firepower to destroy a solar system, focused on one small human ship. And still, the Defiant endured. The ship bucked and rolled as waves of energy struck her hull. But Danny's resonance system turned each attack into a musical note that rang through the metal structure. The Defiant sang under the assault, her hull becoming an instrument that played a song of defiance against impossible odds. Jake gripped his command chair as the ship shook around him. Status report. Hull integrity at 70%, Danny's voice came through the comm. The resonance system is holding, but I don't know how much more punishment we can take. We don't need to take much more, Karen said, excitement creeping into her voice. Captain, look at the tactical display. 2 of the Vorthak ships are showing critical damage. Their own weapons are overloading because of the feedback we're sending back at them. Jake stared at the display. It seemed impossible, but the readings didn't lie. The USS Defiant, a single human destroyer, was not only surviving an attack from the Vorthak Empire's most powerful fleet, but was actually winning the battle. All weapons, continuous fire, Jake ordered. Focus on the damaged ships. The Defiant's missiles and energy weapons struck the wounded Vorthak vessels repeatedly. Without their shields, the enemy ships were vulnerable to even primitive human weapons. One by one, explosions began to bloom along their crystalline hulls. War Master Kethvar felt something he had not experienced in over 2,000 years of conquest: fear. His weapons were useless against this small human ship, and his fleet was taking damage from an enemy that should have been destroyed instantly. What manner of beings are these humans? He asked his tactical officer. Unknown, War Master. Their technology is primitive, but they are using it in ways we cannot predict or counter. They seem to turn our own strength against us. On the bridge of the Defiant, Pete Collins called out from his navigation station. Captain, the enemy formation is breaking up. 3 ships are pulling back with heavy damage. The others are trying to surround us. Jake smiled grimly. The Vorthak had expected to brush aside one small human ship without effort. Instead, they had run into something they had never encountered before. A ship crewed by beings who refused to give up, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. Let them try to surround us, Jake said. The more ships they send against us, the more energy we can absorb and send back at them. Danny, can the system handle multiple simultaneous attacks? Only one way to find out, Captain, came Danny's reply. But I think these Vorthak are about to learn that humans are full of surprises. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in the history of the galaxy, the unstoppable Vorthak Empire had met something that would not be moved. The USS Defiant hung in space, damaged but defiant, ready to continue the fight that would change everything. The battle had been going on for over an hour now, and the USS Defiant was still fighting. Captain Jake Morrison could hardly believe it himself. His small destroyer was surrounded by 9 massive Vorthak warships, each one trying to destroy them with weapons that could crack moons. But somehow they were not only surviving but actually winning. 3 Vorthak vessels had already been destroyed, their crystalline hulls shattered by the feedback from their own weapons. The remaining ships were keeping their distance now, clearly confused by an enemy they could not understand or defeat. War Master Kethvar had never faced anything like the stubborn human ship that refused to die. Damage report, Jake called out, as the ship shook from another enemy attack. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system, sounding tired, but determined. Hull integrity down to 40%, Captain. The resonance system is working perfectly, but the ship herself is taking a beating. We've lost half our weapons and the life support system is running on backup power. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter looked at her tactical display with amazement. Sir, we've been hit by enough firepower to destroy a small planet, but we're still here. How is that possible? Jake smiled grimly. Because we're human, Lisa. We don't know when to quit. On the other side of the battle, War Master Kethvar was experiencing emotions he had thought were long dead. For over 3,000 years he had led Vorthak fleets across the galaxy, destroying every enemy with ease. No species had ever stood against them for more than a few minutes. But this single human ship had been fighting for over an hour and showed no signs of surrendering. Report, he demanded from his tactical officer. 3 ships destroyed, 2 more badly damaged and withdrawing, came the reply. The human vessel continues to absorb our attacks and redirect the energy back at us. Our weapons are designed to overwhelm targets with raw power, but this ship turns that power into a weapon against us. Cathaver studied the tactical display. The small human ship moved through space in patterns that made no sense according to Vorthak military doctrine. Instead of following logical attack routes, it seemed to dance around his fleet, striking where they least expected and vanishing before they could respond effectively. What is their tactical strategy? He asked. Unknown, War Master. Their movements appear random, but they are consistently effective. It is as if each crew member is making independent decisions and somehow coordinating without central control. This was exactly what was happening aboard the Defiant. The formal military structure had given way to something more flexible and deadly. Tactical Officer Karen Walsh fired weapons without waiting for orders when she saw targets of opportunity. Navigator Pete Collins plotted impossible courses that should have torn the ship apart, but somehow Chief Rodriguez's modifications held the vessel together. Medical Officer Dr. Amy Brooks had left her station and was crawling through damaged sections of the ship, making emergency repairs with whatever tools she could find. Communications Officer Steve Turner was coordinating with the distant Colonial evacuation fleet while simultaneously managing internal ship communications and jamming Vorthak targeting systems. Captain, Karen called out. I'm reading massive energy buildup from the lead Vorthak ship. They're preparing something different this time. The energy signature is unlike anything they've used before. Jake looked at the tactical display. The remaining Vorthak ships were forming a new pattern around them, with the flagship at the center. Whatever they were planning, it was going to be their final attempt to destroy the Defiant. Danny, how much more can the resonance system handle? Jake asked. Hard to say, Captain, came the reply from engineering. The system wasn't designed for extended combat. We're pushing it far beyond its theoretical limits. But sir, I've been monitoring the energy patterns from the Vorthak weapons, and I think I can modify our output to make their attacks even less effective. Do it, Jake ordered. Throughout the ship, the humming sound from the resonance system changed pitch. The hull vibration shifted to a different frequency, one that Danny had calculated would create maximum interference with Vorthak weapon systems. It was a desperate gamble based on incomplete data, but it was the kind of creative thinking that made humans dangerous. Pete Collins suddenly looked up from his navigation console with excitement. Captain, I'm detecting something on long range. Sensors. Ships approaching from the direction of Earth. It looks like 3 heavy cruisers and a battleship. Lisa checked her own displays. Confirmed. It's the Earth Fleet Battle Group Admiral Parker requested. They're still 6 hours away, but they're coming. Jake felt a surge of hope, but he knew 6 hours might as well be 6 years. The Defiant couldn't survive that much longer against the Vorthak fleet. But maybe they didn't need to. Maybe they just needed to hold on long enough to prove that humans could fight back. Steve, open a channel to New Boston, Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the face of Governor Patricia Wells, the civilian leader of the colony. Behind her, Jake could see crowds of people boarding evacuation ships. The governor looked exhausted but determined. Captain Morrison, thank God you're still alive, she said. We've been monitoring your battle. The whole colony is watching. You've given us time to evacuate nearly half the population. How much more time do you need? Jake asked. At least 4 more hours to get everyone off planet, the governor replied. Captain, what you and your crew are doing is impossible. How are you surviving against those monsters? Before Jake could answer, the Vorthak attack began, but this time it was different. Instead of individual ship weapons, all 9 remaining vessels fired simultaneously, creating a web of energy that surrounded the Defiant completely. There was nowhere to run and no way to avoid the attack. The ship rang like a bell struck by a giant hammer. The lights went out completely for several seconds before emergency power kicked in. Sparks flew from every console on the bridge, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Hull integrity down to 20%, Danny reported, his voice strained. Captain, we can't take another hit like that. But even as he spoke, something incredible was happening. The resonance system was not just absorbing the Vorthak attack, it was learning from it. The ship's computer systems, damaged but still functioning, were analyzing the energy patterns and automatically adjusting the hull resonance to create maximum interference. Karen looked at her tactical display in amazement. "Captain, the enemy ships are showing critical power fluctuations. I think our resonance feedback is overloading their entire fleet's power grid." Jake realized what was happening. The Vorthak had connected all their ships together to create the massive energy web. But by doing so, they had also connected them all to the Defiance resonance system. The feedback was traveling through their own weapon beams and affecting every ship in their fleet. "All weapons, fire at will," Jake ordered. "Target their power systems." The Defiance remaining weapons opened fire on the Vorthak fleet. Nuclear missiles and plasma bolts struck ships whose shields were fluctuating wildly due to power problems. For the first time in the battle, human weapons were penetrating Vorthak defenses consistently. War Master Kethvar watched in horror as his fleet began to suffer serious damage. The humans had somehow turned his most powerful attack formation into a weakness. His ships were connected in a way that allowed the enemy to attack all of them simultaneously. "Break formation," he ordered. "All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance." But it was too late. The damage was done, and more importantly, something else had changed. The psychological impact of the battle was spreading beyond the immediate combatants. Steve Turner looked up from his communications console with excitement. "Captain, I'm receiving messages from across the galaxy. Word of our battle is spreading through underground networks. Dozens of species are talking about the humans who stood up to the Vorthak Empire." Lisa accessed the communications database and began reading the intercepted messages. "Sir, there are reports of resistance movements forming on occupied worlds. Species that have been under Vorthak control for centuries are beginning to fight back. They're saying that if one human ship can stand against the Empire, maybe they can too." Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what was happening. The Defiance stand was becoming more than just a battle to save New Boston. It was becoming a symbol of hope for every oppressed world in the galaxy. "Governor Wells," Jake said, turning back to the communication with New Boston, "how are the evacuations proceeding?" "Much faster now, Captain," she replied with tears in her eyes. "When people saw your ship fighting those monsters, volunteers came forward to help. Former military personnel, civilian pilots, even cargo haulers are helping evacuate people. You've inspired the whole colony." The battle continued to rage around them, but Jake could see that something fundamental had changed. The Vorthak ships were no longer attacking with their previous confidence. They were being cautious, almost hesitant. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they were facing an enemy that made them doubt themselves. And across the galaxy, on worlds that had known only fear for generations, people were beginning to whisper about the humans who would not surrender. The USS Defiant drifted in space, her hull glowing with absorbed energy from the Vorthak weapons. Captain Jake Morrison looked around his damaged bridge and felt pride in his crew. They had been fighting for 3 hours now against impossible odds, and they were still alive. More than that, they were still fighting back. "Captain," Communications Officer Steve Turner called out, "I'm receiving a priority message from Earth Fleet Command. Admiral Harrison himself wants to speak with you." Jake nodded, though he kept his eyes on the tactical display. 6 Vorthak ships remained, but they were keeping their distance now. The crystalline vessels moved cautiously, no longer attacking with their previous confidence. 3 hours ago, they had expected to destroy one small human ship in seconds. Now they seemed afraid of what that ship might do to them. The main screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Robert Harrison, the Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces. The Admiral looked amazed and somewhat confused as he spoke. "Captain Morrison, I've been monitoring your battle through long-range sensors. What you and your crew have accomplished is impossible according to every military manual ever written. How are you still alive?" Jake managed a tired smile. "With respect, sir, we're still learning that ourselves. Chief Engineer Rodriguez came up with a shield modification that turns enemy attacks against them. But more than that, I think we're proving that humans don't give up easily." Admiral Harrison nodded slowly. Captain, I want you to know that word of your battle has reached Earth. The entire planet is watching. You've become a symbol of human determination. But I have to ask, what is your current status? Can you continue fighting? Before Jake could answer, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system. Captain, I need to show you something. Could you come down to engineering? Jake looked at Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter. You have the bridge. Keep monitoring the Vorthak fleet. Jake made his way through the damaged corridors of his ship. Emergency lights cast strange shadows on the walls, and the air smelled of smoke and burned electronics. But the ship was still alive, still fighting, and that was what mattered. In the engineering section, Danny was standing next to his resonance system, but now it looked completely different. Additional equipment had been connected to it, and new energy readings showed patterns that Jake had never seen before. Danny, what have you done? Jake asked. Danny's eyes were bright with excitement and exhaustion. Captain, we've been absorbing energy from Vorthak weapons for 3 hours. All that power has to go somewhere. I've been storing it in our modified shield generators, and now we have enough energy to power a small star. What does that mean? It means we can turn this whole battle around, Danny replied. I can redirect all that stored energy back at the Vorthak fleet simultaneously. But sir, if I do this, it will probably destroy our ship too. The energy release will be massive. Jake stared at the readings on Danny's computer screen. The numbers were beyond anything he could fully understand, but the implications were clear. They could strike back at the Vorthak with their own accumulated power, but it would likely be a suicide attack. He activated his comm unit. All senior officers report to engineering immediately. Within minutes, Lisa, Tactical Officer Karen Walsh, Navigator Pete Collins, Medical Officer Dr. Amy Brooks, and Steve Turner had gathered around Danny's workstation. Jake explained the situation to them quickly and then looked around at their faces. So that's where we stand, he concluded. We can probably destroy the remaining Vorthak fleet, but we'll die in the process. I want each of you to tell me what you think. Karen spoke first. Sir, we've already accomplished more than anyone thought possible. If we can destroy the rest of their fleet, it will prove to the galaxy that the Vorthak can be beaten. Pete nodded. The tactical situation is clear. Even if Earth fleet arrives in 3 hours, they might not be able to handle 6 Vorthak ships. But if we eliminate those ships now, New Boston will be completely safe. Dr. Brooks looked thoughtful. Captain, I've been monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Our battle is inspiring resistance movements on dozens of worlds. If we can show that humans can actually defeat the Vorthak Empire, it could start a galactic war of liberation. Steve added, Sir, I've been in contact with the evacuation ships at New Boston. They've managed to get 90% of the population off planet safely. If we can buy them just a few more hours, everyone will be saved. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, then she looked directly at Jake. Captain, I've served with you for 3 years. I know you're not going to abandon those people no matter what we decide. But I also know you won't sacrifice the crew without giving us a choice. Jake felt the weight of command pressing down on him. These people trusted him to make the right decision, but there was no right decision. There was only the choice between certain death and possible victory. There's something else, Danny said quietly. I've been monitoring the Vorthak communications. They're calling for reinforcements. If we don't stop them here, more ships will come. This might be our only chance to show the galaxy that they can be beaten. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Steve ran to the nearest communications panel and his face went pale as he read the display. Captain, the Vorthak fleet is moving. They're forming up for another attack. But sir, this formation is different. They're preparing to link all their remaining ships together for a combined assault that will destroy everything in this area of space, including New Boston. Jake looked at the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The 6 remaining Vorthak ships were arranging themselves in a perfect circle around the Defiant. They were going to sacrifice themselves to make sure the human ship was destroyed, even if it meant damaging their own fleet. How long until they're ready to fire? Jake asked. 5 minutes, Karen replied, checking her instruments. Jake looked around at his crew one more time. These people had followed him into an impossible battle and somehow found a way to win. Now they faced one final choice. Danny, how long do you need to prepare your energy release? 3 minutes to charge the system, Captain. Jake activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes, we're going to face the final phase of this battle. The enemy is preparing to destroy us along with the planet we're protecting. We have a way to stop them, but it will require everything we have. I want every person on this ship to know that what we've done here today will be remembered throughout the galaxy. We've proven that humans don't surrender, and we don't abandon those who need our help. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, you should all be proud. Begin the energy release sequence. Throughout the ship, the resonance system began to change its pitch. The hull vibration became stronger and more focused as 3 hours' worth of absorbed Vorthak weapons energy began to build toward a single devastating release. On the bridge, Lisa took her position next to Jake. Captain, it's been an honor serving with you. Jake squeezed her shoulder. The honor has been mine, Lisa. The Vorthak ships completed their formation and began to charge their weapons. War Master Kethvar prepared to fire the shot that would finally destroy the troublesome human vessel, even if it cost him his entire remaining fleet. But as the energy built up in both fleets, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing on the edge of the battle zone. Not just the Earth fleet reinforcements, but vessels from dozens of different species. Word of the human stand had spread, and other races were coming to join the fight. Captain, Steve called, out with excitement in his voice. I'm receiving communications from the approaching ships. It's a coalition fleet made up of species from across the galaxy. They're all here to fight alongside us against the Vorthak. Jake stared at the display in amazement. 47 ships from 23 different species were approaching the battle zone. The human stand had inspired the galaxy to unite against their oppressors. War Master Kethvar saw the approaching fleet, and for the first time in his long life, he felt true fear. His empire had ruled through terror and overwhelming force, but the humans had shown that such force could be resisted. Now, species that had been enslaved for generations were coming together to fight back. Danny, abort the energy release, Jake ordered. We're going to need that power for the real battle that's about to begin. The resonance system powered down as the USS Defiant prepared to lead a galactic alliance against the Vorthak Empire. The small human ship that had stood alone against impossible odds was now the flagship of a rebellion that would sweep across the stars. Jake looked out at the approaching fleet and smiled. The Vorthak had crushed worlds effortlessly for thousands of years, but they had never faced anything like humanity's refusal to surrender. Today, that refusal had become the spark that would light a fire of freedom throughout the galaxy. The real war was just beginning, and the humans had shown everyone how to fight it.